Welcome to the Looper Podcast, a show where we make the rounds with interesting golf personalities. Here's your host, Peyton.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Looper Podcast. Again, my name's Peyton, and I'm a golf pro from Des Moines, Iowa. And this podcast started a couple years ago where I was just interviewing interesting people in the game of golf. And that was a lot of fun, and we plan to continue doing that. But I also wanted to start doing these teaching episodes so that we can help people play better golf. Because if you're playing better golf, you're loving the game more, you're enjoying the game more. And there's a lot of ways that you can learn to play better golf. Golf lessons is one of those ways. I've been teaching golf lessons for almost 20 years now. And there's a bunch of YouTube videos that you can watch, but podcast is another way that you can consume information and learn about your game in another convenient form. And so my hope is that you can use these episodes and use them whenever you have time to continue improving in your game, so that when you get out on the course or on the driving range next, you can implement these things and get better at the game we all love. So as you can see in the title of this episode, we're doing pitching today. The first one we did lag putting, and the second one we're doing pitching, because these are the two parts of your game that I think can lower your scores faster than any other. All of my students that I see, if they get really good at these two parts of the game, I think your scores drop quicker than anything else. We all love to hit the driver long and straight. But if you can work on lag putting and pitching the ball really well, you're going to see those scores drop and have more fun as well. So that's why we started out with these two. So let's get right into it. We're going to start out with basically why it's important and what is it. Pitch shots, in my mind, is any of those shots that you typically hit with the wedges that's not a full swing. That you're taking something off of your swing in order to make it go a distance that's less than the full swing. I typically say that my pitch shots happen under about 70 yards and in. So that happens when you miss a green, typically. It's important because, of course, not everyone hits every single green in regulation. And so you need to be able to get the ball up and down to save a hole, to save a round. Even if it's getting the ball up and then two putting, that is significantly better than what most amateur golfers are doing right now. Giving yourself a shot at staying in the game and continuing to play a good round, because one bad hole can really derail an entire round. We all know and have been there before. So don't let the pitch game be that thing that derails your round. And we're going to talk about some stats here in a little bit that I think are really interesting, that show exactly how many greens we all miss and need to start pitching the ball every single round. But also the pitch shot is one of those shots that's it's so short, but it also brings in probably the most nerves and the most doubt creeps into people's mind. And when you have nerves and you have doubt in your golf swing, that's when bad things happen. I saw a stat many years ago that the last thing that you think about before you hit a shot is typically pretty close to what happens. So if you have any doubt that creeps in your mind, like last second before you pull the trigger, a lot of times that happens. It's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? If you don't have confidence over the shot, then it's going to be difficult to hit a quality golf shot. And that comes from just humans being really bad at depth perception. A lot of us think that we can judge distance and depth perception really well, but we really can't. And that's not you, that's not me, that's all of us. And so relying on that ability is not helpful. And so the things that we're going to talk about in this episode takes the pitch shot from being a feel shot, something that you're guessing at, to a more analytical and a more confident stroke. So that's what we're going to be doing. But first, I wanted to look at some stats. The PGA Tour leader right now of hitting greens in regulation is Caddie, which I guess that's no surprise considering he's one of the top players in the world and has had a phenomenal last year. He hits 73% of greens in regulation, and that equates to about 13 of 18 greens. Now, obviously, every time a player misses a green, that doesn't mean that they are going to be pitching the golf ball. In fact, the lower handicappers and the tour pros are more often hitting a chip shot, or maybe they're hitting a bunker shot. But as the handicaps increase, the likelihood of a player needing to pitch the ball also increases. And so the ability to pitch the ball really well when you're a low to mid to upper handicap player will only increase the need to do that. So this episode, obviously, we're focusing only on the pitch shot. In future episodes, we'll talk about chipping and sand shots and all sorts of stuff like that. But for the sake of this episode, just know that we're aware that, not every time you miss a green, you're going to be pitching. But if you're mid to upper handicap, the likelihood of that being the case is a little bit higher. The PGA Tour average is 66%, so that's just under 12 greens in a round. A scratch player, your average amateur scratch player with 0 handicap, hits 57% of greens. That's about just over 10 greens around. You think about the best players that you know, we probably all know maybe 1-2 scratch players that are really, really good at the game. It's kind of surprising that they hit about half of the greens. And so they've got to be pitching about half the time. And then a 1-5 handicap, we'll go through these a little bit quicker in the breakdown. 1-5 handicap is 48% of greens. That's about just under 9 greens. It's 8.64 greens per round. 6-10 handicap is 37%. That's 6.5 greens a round. 11 to 15 handicap is 28%, about 5 greens per round. 16 to 20 is 21% of greens. That's 3.7 greens per round. 21 to 25 handicap is 12%, and that's 2.16 greens per round. All amateur golfers together hit about 29% of greens in regulation. So that's 5 greens. So as you can see, like every amateur golfer needs to have this in their bag, needs to be able to pitch the ball well in order to score well. And there's a lot of room for improvement for most of us that pitching the ball close can really help to drop those scores. So now we're going to move into what are those tips. We've got 4 tips for you today that you can use right now to help your pitch game and lower your scores. And the first one is just to deal with the setup. So the setup, you want to have the ball slightly back in your stance. For a right-handed golfer, it's going to be a little bit closer to the right foot, and you're going to have your weight a little forward. So, 60% of your weight on your left foot for a right-handed golfer. And what that does is it allows you to hit ball and then ground contact. It allows you to hit the ball first and then go down into the ground, making solid contact and getting some backspin on the ball. And when you have backspin on the ball, that helps to create a more consistent distance that you can rely on. Because when we don't have some backspin, the ball is going to roll out, and it's hard to predict how far a ball is going to roll after it hits the ground. When it hits the ground and rolls a ways, you don't know what's going to happen. There's more elements that can cause that ball to go different distances, to go different directions. And so you want it to stop fairly quickly. Now, because it's a smaller shot, it's not going to, probably not going to zip backwards, but it's going to check up a little bit if you can hit ball and then ground in that order. So the next thing is to allow the weight of the club head or gravity to swing the club. If you think about your long irons, your driver, you are using your torso, your arms to exert force and swing the golf club as hard as you can. You're trying to hit the ball. In the pitch shot, you're just along for the ride, and you're allowing the club head to swing itself like a pendulum, okay? So the weight of the bottom of the club, the head, is what's swinging the club. You're obviously picking up and rotating the club, but as far as the acceleration through the ball, if you can allow gravity to do that more than a normal shot, that makes it more of a consistent swing speed. It allows you to hit down and through the ball rather than getting a little timid or decelerating through the ball and lifting up. And it allows you to make a little bit more consistent swing, hitting ball and then ground, because you're not trying to create a long golf shot, hit it far. You just want a consistent distance, a predictable, consistent distance. You're not looking to hit the ball really far. So if you can allow gravity to do it. Gravity is going to take that club through impact at the same speed every single time. If you've ever measured your swing speed for a driver or for, any one of your clubs that you're hitting full, you know that swing speed can vary from swing to swing. You might feel like you're swinging the same every time, but it changes every time because the way you swing the ball or swing the club is not the same, and you change from one shot to the next, and so it changes the distance slightly. It might not be a big thing, but it's enough that in the pitch game it can affect where the ball ends up and how consistently you can rely on that shot. And so if you can allow gravity to swing the club head and have what I call dead hands, and basically that just means your hands are on there for the ride. They're not super active like they would be in a long swing, but they're just there to connect you to the golf club and allow the club head to swing. So you're starting the swing and allowing the pendulum to just swing the club. And if you can have the gravity take the club head, it's going to bottom out. It's going to go down into the ball instead of lifting up because it can't work against gravity, right? So the gravity is going to take the club head down and through the ball. And because you've got your weight a little bit forward, the bottom of your swing arc is going to be slightly in front of the ball. And that's where you want it on this pitch shot. So you want it to bottom out right after the ball until it comes back up on the other side of that pendulum. So that's the second thing, is allow the weight of the club head to swing the club and use those dead hands to just hold the club. The next thing is to imagine a clock superimposed over your golf swing. So at the top of your head is a 12. At the bottom where the ball is a 6. And then for a right-handed golfer, to your right is the 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Okay. And those are going to be markers for you mentally to stop your hands in your backswing. And so for one of your clubs, for say your sand wedge, you've got a 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and 11 o'clock swings. They're all the same, they're just different lengths, okay? So you're still allowing the club head to be swung by gravity. You're still having the same setup. You're just allowing the start of your pendulum to be a little bit higher. And when it's a little bit higher, it allows the ball to go a little bit farther. And so what you can do is, with all of your wedges, have 4 or 5 different places that you stop your hands, and then that creates a whole collection of yardages that you have. And so, for instance, I have a 60 degree, 56 degree, a 52 degree, and then a 48 degree wedge. So I have 4 wedges, and I use typically an 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and 11 o'clock shot. So 4 of those. So that gives me 16 different shots that I can rely on, and I know exactly how far they go because I've put in the work to discover that. And I can rely on it every time because of the gravity type swing that we talked about. But also I know that when my hands stop at that clock number, it's going to create this about the same amount of force on the golf ball. And so that takes us right into the last one, is to dial in your distances. Take an hour or two, go to the driving range, go to your simulator, your local simulator, whatever it is, where you can measure your distances really easily and hit every one of your wedges at every one of those clock positions in your backswing and record those. Figure out what the typical distance is you hit each one of those wedges. Now, there's going to be some of them that overlap and go the same yardage. But say you have a 60 degree that you're swinging at 10 o'clock, and you have your 48 degree that you're swinging at 8 o'clock. Maybe those go the same distance. Well, they're not going to fly the same height. So you're going to have your 60 degree that goes much higher, probably stops much quicker. Your 48 is going to be a little bit lower and roll a little bit more. So you've got 16 different shots. You probably have, 12 different yardages in there. But that allows you to not have to think about it when you get to the golf course. And you can take the doubt and the nerves out of it, and you can just measure the distance of the shot know exactly what your number is, what your swing is, and go for it and execute. And if you can do that, if you can invest the 1 or 2 hours on the driving range where you figure out what your numbers are, that's going to pay off huge in the long run. And what I've done is I've created an Excel document where on the left side of the left column, I have my my golf club, so all 4 of my wedges. And then across the top row, I've got those times. And so for every one of those shots, I have this little chart that I know I can hit those distances. And so you don't even have to think about it. Now, after a while, like I don't carry that chart with me. After a while, it just becomes kind of second nature. But to start out, to know what your distances are, print off a chart like that in your Excel, in Excel, and put it in your bag. And then when you are faced with a shot that's a pitch shot, you've got the knowledge and you've got the confidence to be able to pull off that shot. So that's kind of all I have for today. Those 4 simple things. The first one is just to set up ball slightly back, weight forward. The second one, allow the club head to swing the club and use dead hands. The third one is to imagine that clock superimposed over your golf swing and figure out how you can stop your hands at each one of those times, and use the same golf swing every single time. It's the same exact shot. It's just a longer backswing. And then the final one is to invest that 1 or 2 hours just to get started, and fill out your chart to dial in your distances, to figure out how far you hit each one of your wedges, each one of the time designations. And if you can do those 4 things, I think you're going to drop your scores really quickly, and you're going to have a lot of fun doing it. So that's all for now. Let me know if you have any questions that you would like covered in a future episode of The Looper. You can either find me on social media on both Twitter and Instagram. The show's handle is @Looper Podcast, and my personal is @Eric Peyton Golf. You can also just go to my website and fill out the contact form on there. My website is ericpeytongolf.com. So that's all for now. Thank you for joining us, and we will talk to you next time.
Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to subscribe and rate The Looper wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow the show on Twitter and Instagram @Looper Podcast. Talk to you next time.